to Andy McCarthy now, former U.S. Assistant Attorney and a Fox News contributor. Andy, great to see you. Thanks for being here. First of all,
morning, David.
I want to talk about the National Enquirer publisher, Pecker's story, or stories that he was telling about what he did, the catch and kill and everything. Was the jury ever told by the judge that that's not illegal, that politicians and personalities and celebrities do that sort of thing all the time? Catch and kill, as bad as it sounds, it's not illegal.
No, they were not given an instruction during the testimony of Pecker that that is not illegal. And in fact, David, when the state had opened, when Matthew Colangelo, one of the lead prosecutors in the case, gave New York's opening statement in the case, Alvin Bragg's office's statement, they repeatedly called those payments illegal payments.
Yes.
So they didn't explain to the jury why they were illegal or what made them illegal, but they just flatly said they were illegal, and the judge is not stopping them from doing that.
That's horrible, because, I mean, the jury's not expected to know law, and they don't know what's legal and what isn't. It's the job of the jurist. It's a job of the judge in the case to tell them what is legal and what is not. And if they don't know it, they're getting propaganda, not law. I do what you mentioned, the opening statement of the prosecution. And by the way, this is the guy who came over from the DOJ, from the president's DOJ. So he took a lesser job in order to pursue this. Makes people wonder whether the White House is involved. But here was something else he said in his opening statement. It was election fraud, pure and simple. We will never know, and it doesn't matter if this conspiracy was the difference maker in a close election. He was talking about suppressing the story in the National Enquirer. Now, the same exact thing could be said for what the Biden folks were doing in 2020 before that election in trying to kill the Hunter Biden story, couldn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely could. In fact, David, at the same time, simultaneously, the same thing could be said for Hillary Clinton's campaign. They were putting out a bogus story that Trump was an operative of the Kremlin. And they did that under bogus campaign research that they said they did, opposition research. And then in the books of the campaign, they did what Bragg is alleging Trump falsely did, which is they characterized a payment that was for one thing as legal expenses. So this case could just as equally have been brought against Hillary Clinton. And in many ways, you could argue that it was a stronger case against Hillary Clinton because her campaign was actually fined by the Federal Election Commission for a fraudulent practice. Both the Justice Department and the FEC looked at Trump on the same thing Bragg is prosecuting here and decided it wasn't a campaign finance violation.
Yeah. So
query, what is it that Bragg is saying makes what Trump did illegal, made these payments illegal, that they're telling the jury were illegal?
Now, if the judge is not doing his job by telling the jury what is legal and what is not, will the defense for Donald Trump spell that out clearly in closing arguments or during the course of this trial? And if so, by the way, is there enough evidence against what this judge is doing to either declare a mistrial or perhaps win on an appeal?
Well, let's take those separately, right? If the judge is the one who's violating the law, the thought of getting a mistrial from the judge who's doing the violation is unlikely, right? And I think a lot of this is bad enough that this is apt to be thrown out on appeal if Trump gets convicted, but that'll be cold comfort. That'll be 2 years from now.
Oof.
So, right now is the time that the jury has to be told what the law is. And what concerns me is even if the Trump defense could straighten this out, we're talking 6 or 8 weeks from now.
Wow.
And as this case is going on day by day, the jury is forming an impression, and it's going to be very difficult if the judge doesn't right now tell them, no, here's what the law is, then, I don't see how that gets undone.
It's hard not to call this a kangaroo trial from everything that's been going on in there. Andy McCarthy, my opinion, not yours necessarily, but thank you, Andy. Great to see you as always, my friend.
Thanks, David.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.